Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pesty Podcast. Today, we are joined by Taylor Olson, CEO and co-founder of Applause. Frankly, probably a lot of you guys use. Applause just released its 2026 Home Services Benchmark Report, analyzing over 18,000 performance data points across 3,000 companies using the platform. The report breaks down what high-performing teams are actually doing differently, from technician productivity to reservice rates, routing efficiency, compensation, and customer satisfaction. This episode is about what the numbers reveal and what pest control operators should pay attention to. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Excited to be here.
Really excited to have you on. The benchmark report that you guys released, which I did read through, was super interesting. And a side of the business that, me and my team as a marketing agency is not super exposed to, right? The operations side, the technician side, but is really valuable for us to understand because the downstream effects of some of the work that we do, whether it's setting expectations for customers or leads or helping our clients scale, and then simply just empathizing with, what it means to take care of the fulfillment side of things is really important. So I found this report fascinating.
I love benchmark reports. In general, when you talk about hey, what are the top performing pest control companies doing that's different? I would suspect that one of the things that they're doing different is they have access to benchmark reports and peer data where they don't have to just sort of compete against themselves historically, but they know what the upper 25% or upper 10% of their competitors, they know what's possible. And I'm just such a big fan of benchmark reports for that reason, because it gives you a goal that makes sense and it's clear. And I think when teams see this information, one of two things could happen. So it might look at it and be like, hey, we're actually doing better than I realized. We're a top 10% company when it comes to reviews and customer satisfaction and the efficiency of our routes. A lot of companies, I think it's a little bit of a wake-up call. It's like, oh, I didn't know that companies could even pull that off, some of these numbers. And we do the same for our company. We're in software, we're in business to business, small business, medium-sized software. And I go out and search for benchmark reports so I know what our goal should be: sales and marketing and efficiency. So just generally speaking, I love benchmark reports. I think they're really helpful.
I totally agree. We often cite benchmarks in the work that we do with our clients, whether it's like close rate, what expectations a client should have regarding what they need to be focused on and hitting. And I think also when you share those benchmarks, like you said, it could be a wake-up call, maybe not even to the fact that what the actual benchmark is, but it's like, oh, I'm not even measuring that. I don't even know how I would get that number, which opens up, an opportunity for them to go figure that out as well in order to optimize their business.
Great point.
Okay, so your 2026 benchmark report analyzed 18,000 data points across 3,000 companies. What finding in the data most challenged what operators typically assume about performance?
I think that one of the big ones, let me look at it on my other screen just so I don't quote it wrong. I think people were surprised at the reservice rates. That reservice rates for a lot of companies are sub 5%. That not every company is pulling that off. I think that one even surprised me because reservice rates, they're not great. It's going to happen. Not every job's perfect. Sometimes you just need to go back multiple times if it's a tricky pest issue. But at the end of the day, two things are happening when you have to do a reservice. The customer isn't satisfied. You didn't solve the job. So there's some level of unhappiness there. And then you go back and you do a job that you don't get paid for. And there's a lot of waste that happens there. And so I think that the number was low enough that it surprised me. And it made me think okay, there's actually a pretty high bar for how good you need to be at completing a job and doing it right and not having too many callbacks. So that was probably the biggest one. I'd also say maybe one, if I could do a 1V. I think the quantity of reviews, you and I were talking about that before we started recording. I mean, I want to say it was 13 to 14% of pest control companies. They have over 1,000 5-star reviews. I mean, it's getting wild how good companies are at highlighting good service and getting their customers to leave the reviews. So I mean, if you want to be a top 10% pest control company when it comes to Google reviews and how you're displayed online, 1,000 is really sort of the new gold standard.
Did you find any correlations between reservice rates and any of the other data that you collected?
I would have to imagine there is. That's a great question. I don't know if we did that. I'm going to take that back and look at what the correlation would be, because it'd have to be, right? I would have to think that as reservice rate goes up, let's say someone's in that 10, 15, 20%, NPS is coming down, 5-star reviews are coming down. And I think the other thing, back to your original question on maybe surprising, I think that technician retention and satisfaction would be meaningfully down. Because when you look at that chart in the benchmark report, the number one thing that technicians say excites them and motivates them about their job is knowing that the customer was happy with their work. And the technician either explicitly knows because they heard from the customer, or obviously just understands the customer's not happy with the reservice. So yeah, we need to go double click on that. It'd have to be correlated though.
I mean, yeah, you guys have so much good data, right? Like just letting whoever you have to do that kind of analysis just have some fun with it and look at what's correlated. I'm sure there would be some interesting unlocks there. So the report defines exceptional companies as those hitting 8 to 12 plus visits per day, sub 5% reservice rates, minimal drive time, and world-class satisfaction scores.
I think that it's either world-class satisfaction scores or the drive time, because drive time is such a function of just what your go-to-market plan was and how you grew your business. You know, some companies just naturally, the way they grow their business, have a lot of route density. And then as
Door to
long as
door.
you're just being smart about how you're routing, the density is fundamentally there. Other companies, they're more spread out. It just gets difficult to drive that number down. The bigger you get and the more confined you keep your geographical area, the more you can drive that number down. That one can be difficult for some companies, and it's super important. I mean, if you think about half the companies, I think it was, were spending, the technicians spending between an hour and 2 a day in driving, pretty similar to reservices in the fact that you're just not making money when that's happening. And that's going to pull down the number of stops that can be done each day. And that ends up, across the company having a pretty big impact on profitability from what I've seen. And then world-class customer service, that one, really just comes down to standards and training and how good your technicians are and what tools you're using to monitor it. But I think that technology can help, technology can really automate those things and surface the good and get that good to flow internally to the technicians online, can surface the bad, keep that internally, hopefully, and not have that go online. But it's also just dependent on culture, how big of a deal is wowing the customer at every stop to your company? Are people rewarded for it? Or they held accountable to it? I think sometimes cultural issues on just service can creep into any company. And I think when they do, those can really be difficult to correct. So yeah, I would probably say those two.
Have you guys done any research around double-clicking on the world-class satisfaction scores and maybe just also using a little more tactically, like really good reviews? Have you guys done any research around how your customers go about maybe doing extra things, or where they're really tactical about how they go about giving those 5-star experiences?
Yeah, we have noticed in some instances, companies will have sort of an expectation, I guess, for lack of a better word, but the way technicians are sort of taught to behave on a property is that you do the job and you do it right, and they have all their training on what they're supposed to do. And then can you find one other thing on the property that you can help with or quickly fix along the way, and then drop a note to the homeowner and let them know you did it. We honored the top scoring technician across our entire platform at our company offsite in January. It was a technician from Sela Pest Control. He had incredible scores on everything. Google review count, net promoter score, all the stuff. And he came to our offsite and he's talking to us and we're asking him, how did you do this? And he was like a really humble, nice guy. His name was Jake. And that was when we asked him, why do you think you score so well? He said that he doesn't ever ask the customer to leave him a review or to fill out the survey. That's not his style. Claus automatically does it, so he doesn't have to. But nevertheless, he just says, I just try to do a really good job and find one thing that I can help with. He's like, I'll take the trash can to the curb. Or he had a customer who was an older gal that opened the door and just started crying. And it turned out she had lost her husband that week. And he spent 15 minutes just being with her. And he just does that on his route. And you could see if you're going to do that on your route, that's going to make a big impact on everything, on retention and customer set. So I don't think most companies do that, but I've heard it from enough to where I think that's like a cool little nugget that people could potentially apply. And then I think rewards matter. I'm biased to say that as part of what our tool does, but it matters. Like if you look at the benchmark report, that's the second thing that's the most motivating for a technician is getting money and getting rewarded for going above and beyond. So I think when companies embrace leaderboards and performance bonuses for wowing the customer, you inevitably are going to see customer experience go up.
First of all, it sounds like that technician's way of being is just like just like the dude was meant to have a career in service, some way, shape, or form. He's right where he is meant to be, just because of how he shows up in the world and how he interacts with people. So Salo's really lucky to have that guy, and I'm sure they know it. But tactically, that's a really good takeaway, because I also bet that even if you're not Jake, but you tactically do those things, you start to keep an eye out for what to do, what additional little thing that you can do, or big thing, every time you stop. I would bet that also changes you a little bit chemically when you do it, because you know you're doing a good thing, right? It's kind of like I know there are studies out there where it's like if you pay something forward, or if you give something or give a gift, right, you end up feeling better than if you had actually received something. And I wonder if company sort of has that as part of their culture and then rewards it, if that would just become out of habit, the kind of thing that their technicians do, and they feel better in their job.
Yeah, I completely agree. It would have to. I think a technician that does that, to your point, feels better enough about their job that if we could measure it, I bet technicians that are behaving that way have longer retention. I bet they stay in the industry and in that position much longer than others because there's just more job satisfaction. And that's also one of the things that I think caught us off guard a little bit in a good way when we had started Applause, is just surfacing the feedback from the customer when they're happy. And that's usually a 5-star Google review response or filling out a net promoter score and saying why they were a 10. And then just immediately getting that to the technician. When we talk to technicians and ask them how they like our tool and is it helping you do better work, they'll tell us that, yeah, I'm in there all day because I love to see what my customers say that I did for them that made them happy. Like that's one of their favorite reasons for being in the app. And so I think the whole thing just kind of feeds off of each other. They get more motivated and excited, then they do better service. I've also noticed, and I wonder if you've seen this or noticed this because of what you do, I feel like I'm so often on a pest control company's website, and it feels like the way they position their company as a brand and the way they probably talk about it internally is like, hey, we are in the service industry and we are here to serve. And our goal is to make the home a safe and happy place. And that is why we exist. And so they sort of just center their whole mission and vision statement on taking care of people and their homes and making them happy and making it safe. And I think that message is a great message for a pest control company. It's a great brand. And then I just think internally to the things we've been talking about, that drives good culture and good outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think the majority of, and this isn't a pest control industry problem, this is just a small business problem, but I think the majority of the industry, in my experience, when I talk to operators, I don't typically see that philosophy really embedded in the business the way I would hope you sort of just explained it. Because I think that if that were the case, and that was really an important part of the culture that was taken seriously, as a company, I suspect you end up being much more successful. And because that is what you're doing, is you're taking care of people and you're helping them stay healthy, and you're helping there's a certain subset of customers out there who their home is their sanctuary, and it's a place where they can relax and they can feel at ease, and it might be the only place in the world where they can feel that way. So as a pest control company, you're able to add to that for those people. It is a big deal. I mean, it's not just pest control, right? But it's peace of mind for your
Yeah,
customer.
it is. And I think a company's ability to get better and better at incredible service and sort of operationalize that with their culture. I have noticed that pest control owners and companies tend to get better at that over time. And the reason is because it isn't as obvious when you start a company and you really need to grow. Like you think a lot about growing. It's not as obvious that the best way to grow is to have happy customers that buy more of your products and refer their friends. It's the cheapest way to grow. And then it can become really hard to grow over time time when you have a leaky bucket and 20 or 30% of your customers leave every year. It can take a while for owners and managers to just totally understand all those dynamics and then accept them and then say, wait a minute, we are not spending enough time, money, and resources on excellent service and retaining our customers. And the same thing happened to me. When I launched my last company, which it wasn't a pest control company, it was service and software, it probably took me 3, 4, 5 years to really figure that out. And then because I went through that journey at my last company for a decade when I started Applause, is day one, our most important metric is customer retention. That is what we care about more than any other metric.
So I don't think it's any coincidence that you guys have the success that you've had and that you stumble across some of these features that are customer favorites, like the technicians being able to like go in there and really easily see the reviews that they're getting. I'm actually curious, did you guys do anything special to make that easier specifically because you stumbled across that data point? Or was that just sort of built into the feed that was available to them and you only learned later that that was something that they used the app for?
We built it in out the gate because our initial assumption was that they would like it, that it would be a good thing for them to see. We just underestimated how much they would like it. We didn't realize that they would be looking at it and getting in the app 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And so then as we started to see that data come through, we just started to highlight it more, make it easier to see. We enabled the pop-up app, so sometimes they don't have to go in the app if they don't want to see when they get really good feedback. Oh, and then the one other thing before I forget, when you asked the question about other things that companies do that have those great world-class service benchmarks, another thing I've been noticing that companies are starting to do is they're requiring their technician to take photos of what they've done at the job and then upload that into the CRM so that it can be sent to the customer and the post-service email. So it's basically proof of service. And it's just another little thing that I think helps a homeowner know, like, I wasn't there, I didn't see anything, I got a bill, but okay, yeah, looks like they were on my property doing good stuff, so I'll stick around.
Yeah. Well, and in pest control in particular, right, it's making the invisible visible, and which is also interesting because I have yet to come across an operator who like really wants to be visible. To be honest, they sort of broad assumption is that they almost think of themselves like the IT guys, right? Like just stay in the background, make sure nothing goes wrong, don't get on your client's radar, don't give them any reason to think about you other than to know that you showed up and that they don't have bugs. Because if they remember that they're have you as a service, then they're also going to remember to cancel you if the bugs are gone and maybe they, right? But and there's probably a balancing act there, but like what you're talking about I think is really important and also just so easy, right, to do when you send out those reports afterwards.
I would agree with all that. I think that from what I've seen, as companies really scale and get really dialed in, they're comfortable being more visible. They would rather sort of be in front of it with the customer and the way they communicate and show off that they were there and the good work they did. And you probably will lose a few customers that you wouldn't have because they forgot they had you. And when they remember, they're like, actually, I don't need it anymore. But I think like on balance, it is better to show off your good work and communicate.
I think also it goes back to what are you prioritizing, right? Because the tricky part about that is that you don't know what the opportunity cost is of not doing a better job of keeping in touch with your customers and being more visible. Because all you know is that if you send out a survey, it's guaranteed that 1% of customers are going to churn that survey got sent to because it just reminded them, oh yeah, I want to cancel my pest control. What you don't know is how much longer do our customers stick around who don't cancel and who appreciated that touch point and who appreciated the fact that I'm not just invisible in the background, but that I'm actually there to ensure that their homes is a place where they do get to experience peace of mind. Because the thing that's visible is the churn. What's invisible is the potential retention, the positive retention ramifications of having a better relationship with your customer. So
yeah, great point. I just thought of a couple other things that I've noticed as I've been in offices of high-performing teams. One of them is that I'll see more leaderboards on TVs in the office where people show up. So whatever KPI that you really care about for your technicians, I'll see sort of a flat screen TV at the area that the techs congregate, and they'll show leaderboards. You can do that with our tool. You can do it with Google Sheets on your own. But just the fact that it's visible, it's there, I do think that makes an impact. And the other thing is when we first started the company, one of our first features was enabling customer tips. This was coming out of COVID, and tipping was just becoming a lot more common in different spots. So we had tips, and then we went into reviews and leads and all scorecards and all that. But while we were doing tips, there was an outlier that we saw. We had like 100 technicians on the tool, and someone was getting 2-3 times the amount of tips as everyone else. So I called, I think, the top 10 technicians and just said, "What's up? I'm Taylor with Applause." Asked them why they thought they were getting more tips. And what I noticed from all of them, and especially the number one guy, he was a technician from Frontline, they were pretty friendly. They made it a habit of talking to the customer. They like to talk to their customer. They're probably a little bit more extroverted, but they would go out of their way. They would knock when they got there. They would knock when they were done. And I think that you'd mentioned earlier, a lot of technicians are more sort of the IT guy in the back that maybe doesn't want to interact. If I had a pest control company, I would do training, and I would try to really get my technicians more comfortable interacting a little bit with the customer. They don't have to do sales, or they don't have to do anything fancy, but just to be able to smile, to just let them know what you did and have a connection. I think that matters.
I agree. I just thought of a way to position, a pest control company. There's room out there for someone to plant their flag as like the friendliest pest control company in the world. Just be all in, right, on that like friendliness, and have to hire people. You could probably easily do personality tests and also tests for like how friendly is this person? What is the experience my customers are going to have when they do get the opportunity to interact with our technicians and our CS team?
And the friendliness is also sort of a signal of safety too. I think that, I don't know what the numbers are, maybe you do, but of the percentage of customers that are purchasing or ends up being the one to retain or cancel a pest control service, it has to be over 50% are women, since usually they're in a role where they're at home more. And I've noticed with my wife, the way that she talks about the home service pros that come, whether it's HVAC or pest or whatever, is she will mention things like, "That guy made me feel uncomfortable," or "I like that guy. He's nice. I trust him." And I saw a text thread that she had with like 10 other women in our neighborhood one time, and someone was referring a plumber. And the way they talked about the plumber was that he was nice and you could trust him and he seemed safe. And I think as men, we really underappreciate how a lot of women do have to deal with safety, and really have to just think and be aware of that. And I think it impacts who they're willing to do business with more than we realize. And so I think when technicians are friendly and they interact in a friendly way, that's a signal for safety. And I would imagine that would produce a little bit more retention.
I suspect so too. I mean, that is definitely something, I don't have those numbers, but that is something that we focus a lot on when it comes to part of the set of things that we know is important to try to make clear the consumer. And actually, the one data point that I do have is that in a PPMA survey, Pest World breakout session in Denver a couple of years ago, some of the data that they shared included what were the most important considerations when you were looking for a pest control company, or when you consider a pest control company. Number one was experience. Number two was that they're trustworthy.
Interesting.
And so on every single landing page we create, homepage, Google Ads landing pages, one of the first things that we want to show visually to consumers is that this is a trustworthy company, whether it's through reviews and ratings, or if it's on desktop and we have room for visuals and showing, someone that is clearly like very friendly looking, and then communicating in the way that's friendly and trustworthy. Like all those things are super important for consumers as they're considering who to use, and then I'm sure also who to keep around.
Yeah. Agree with all that, man. Well, back on the benchmark report, any other questions that you had on benchmark report?
Let's see. So I've got a few more. I know we're running low on time here. Let's do this. So we'll make these last couple questions a little more rapid fire, and I'll just let you respond. So more than half of technicians are paid hourly, but roughly 30% operate under commission or hybrid models. What does the data suggest about aligning incentives with service quality versus just output?
It generally goes up. As we talked about earlier, it's the second highest motivator for technicians, and they figure out really quick that if they do better on the quality measures that they're judged on, the reviews, the net promoter score, route retention, and all that, they make more money. And when you can make that distinction really clear, because you make it obvious in their paycheck, or you use a tool like Applause and it's instant, their behavior will adapt to it over time. So we have noticed that companies that have a higher percentage of the technician pay that is variable comp based on performance has higher output in terms of revenue per route, and they have higher quality measures across almost every category. And I think that's sort of an obvious thing to say. I think most owners intuitively get it. I think the reason that a lot of them don't do it is they're hard to set up and hard to manage. It can just be a lot of work. No.
Yeah, you have to be willing to put in the work to create the infrastructure that not only gives you access to the data that you need in an accurate and consistently reliable way, but then you also need to then take that data and present it to your technicians. And then on top of all of that, you need to create a compensation model that is straightforward enough for your technicians to very easily, like you said, understand their certain behavior that you want to reward directly ties to their compensation. So clearly there's some work in there that you would have to do to kind of get to that point.
Well said. You could cut up these performance-based compensation plans in so many different ways. What we generally recommend for companies that are getting started is just pick 3 metrics that you care about the most and design a simple compensation structure around those. Focus there, and then you could add to it over time.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Last question. When technicians were asked what motivates them most, more chose customer satisfaction over pay, as you've mentioned. How should that influence how pest control owners think about culture and accountability?
I think it's what we've been talking about. I do this as an owner for the exact same reason. So it's almost the exact same for me and my employees as I think an owner of pest control should do with theirs. It's worth your time to take the effort or pay for the tools that is going to surface that great feedback all the time, because it's sort of like the rocket fuel for your team's motivation. I think every employee in any role generally is operating somewhere between 70 and 90% of what they're capable of. And a great leader or manager, it's our job to get them closer to that 90, if not 100%. And there's so many different ways to motivate people, but this is obviously a really big one. And so I think it is just worth the time and the investment to do it. I think it should be happening daily. I think for companies that do sort of a weekly get together with the technician or team, or maybe a monthly all hands, they should be highlighting those things repeatedly during those. They should highlight them during their annual offsites. I think that it should be a massive part of the culture. And I think I see it. There's so many pest control companies, when I'm in their building, it's clear they're doing this. And they're generally the companies that are growing really fast and have scaled and gotten pretty large.
One more rapid fire question, because you've mentioned a couple times now that you've actually been on-prem, on-site to check out the offices and the culture of it sounds like some of your customers. And then you've also alluded to some of the things that you've seen where there seems to be a correlation between the success that they're having and those behaviors, such as having a TV with a leaderboard up somewhere that's visible for everyone to see. Are there any other things that you've seen that seems to show up among top pest control companies, or maybe even not even just pest control, but ancillary to pest control, the other industries that you serve, that pest control could also learn from?
Yeah, good question. This is a little bit of my own bias because it's just my own personality, but I think I've seen a pattern of some companies, their office environment is just pretty organized. Things seem reasonably clean. They're in a place. There's not just a ton of just things lying around everywhere. And I feel like when I'm showing up with a company that I know they're doing great because they're on the PC Top 100, I can see how fast they're growing. Very frequently when I'm in their building or their trucks or wherever, things feel put together and organized and clean. And you can just see that they care about that component, that visual component, just how they show up and work. So I think cleanliness and organization, and I mean, again, I'm that way. So I don't, maybe it's my own bias, because I've shown up to some companies that I won't name names, but like we're a top 10 revenue pest control company. And I was pretty surprised at the state of their office. Was just sort of like, would have expected a little bit more, in terms of just, so that's one. Another one, I think that along with the leaderboard and probably some of the intentionality around the space, I've noticed in a lot of the top performing pest control companies, they are intentional about what they put on their walls. They will have their mission statement that's blown up and it's in the front lobby, or they'll have just motivational quotes, and there's just the visual component of the space helps you understand what they're all about and what they care about. It's kind of, do you ever watch Hard Knocks on HBO, where they go inside an NFL football team?
I might have seen an episode, but not really.
It's sort of like that. If you notice in the NFL teams, they really deck out the facility and all the motivational messaging that they want. So I think that's another one. But that's a great question. I'll have to think of other things that I've seen, and if I can think of anything else that's cool, I'll let you know. There was one owner, I'll leave this last thing with you. You can include it or cut it, but he was noticing that summer sales teachers would come in to his state and he'd lose a lot of his customers every summer. I think by law in his state, you had to put in a sign that clearly marks who you are and what you did about the chemicals you left on the property. You have to put a yard sign in this state. And he started to suspect that that yard sign was making it easier for the sales rep to pick him off and be prepared to pitch against his company. So they would put the yard sign in, and then I want to say that someone's job in the company after the legal duty was fulfilled was to go back the next day and take all the yard signs out so they wouldn't leave that clue behind, and they just do it in the
Wow.
summertime.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me that they felt like that had reduced churn in the summertime by a few percentage points.
That's wild. How interesting. Super, super cool. I appreciate you sharing all this insight, going over the data of the benchmark report with me. You know, I told you when we were off mic before the interview, I'm a huge fan of Applause. Everything about the review solicitation strategies that I had been banging my drum for years, telling clients like they needed to do it this way without having a tool, like a one tool that took care of it all to point them to. You guys really just absolutely nailed it. I don't see anyone else even come close to getting the number of reviews as they get. It's you guys. So that was not, for anyone listening, that was not intended to be a commercial for Applause, but seriously, just such a huge fan. So you've done a great job with
Thank
the
you, Andrew.
business and the product.
That's so nice of you to say. I am really proud of our team and the product they built. We love serving the pest control industry. It's just, I love the owners. I like, a lot of them are my friends now. I think that they do great work. It's a really needed service, and we just love being a part of it and having them as customers. So yeah, but thank you for the kind words. Big fan of your work too. I've been seeing it a little bit more now that we have overlap in customer base, and you guys are doing great stuff. So keep it up.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Taylor.
Yeah.